Chapter 2. When I was around 10 years old, I remember Mother used to send me buying things from the supply centers. The place were known as Vettureros, place where things like vegetables, bananas, and sweet potatoes were sold. One of them was near my house, where charcoal and vegetables were to be bought. However, these places didn't stay open very long and closed at noon. One day, Mother sent me to the Vettureros too late in the day. I had to go away, even though it was closed by the time I got there, just as I had logically suspected. However, I could not go home without the things ordered by my mother, or I would be punished. I looked for them, a way to obtain them. I went down an alley, a medium passageway that was not very wide, and by a window of a kitchen, I started yelling out some Vertero to assist me. I remember seeing Angelique, a slightly thick woman of medium height, dark skin, and slanted eyes, inside a building. She was probably about 40 years old at the time and invited me in by saying, "Come in, come in." I went to her, and even though I was quite hesitant and asked if she had what I needed inside the place, there was another woman who had similar features as Angelica. Both women stared at me as if I was expected a piece of prey. They gestured to each other, approving that my presence was going to serve them with their plans. Meanwhile, I continued explaining that I had come for my mother's errand. A robust woman left me standing without an answer, so I figured I'd be consulting the other women to see if they had what I'd come for. However, their reaction was different. They just looked at each other, muttering between themselves. Angelica, after pausing in the conversation, approached me, extended her hand. She said, "Don't fear. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're a beautiful boy." I stayed silent as she said this, and I noticed the other woman had an evil smile on her face as she watched what Angelica was beginning to execute. It was then I realized that both had planned this for me, and without hesitation, Angelica began to touch me unduly. At first, I did not want to think of this particularly strange. This seemed like a woman who would be like my mother, to care for me, even though the affection was somewhat unexpected and unusual. This was something about calming in the first moments as she caressed my face, because my own mother had never shown me any kind of affection. I started to realize things, though, when this began to be different than even my granny's touch when she would caress me and sing me a song. Those were the moments I could feel that special love that mothers have for their children, although in my case, a granny for her grandchild. Without taking my eyes off the other woman, still did not find danger in those movements made by Angelica. Angelica approached me more, in a more grotesque and strange way. Her nose was so close to my face that I could feel her breathing. I wanted to move away, but she wrapped her arms around my back and pulled me towards her. She ran her hand down my neck and down my shoulders over and over again. During all of this, I said nothing. I thought that at any moment she was going to get away from me and that I would be able to get back to my mother very shortly. At this point, I was beginning to be consumed with thoughts of taking too long while being out of the house, and that mother would be punishing me for it when I returned. I found myself unable to move in the present situation because I was so afraid what my mother would do to me. Angelica went deeper and deeper with her desires. At this time, she had already gone through my body completely. Suddenly, she looked at me deeply as if wanting to say something to me. That look lasted a few seconds. Sorry, I lost my place. A few seconds, and has burned a permanent memory in my mind. I can see it still to this day. This was the instant when my private parts began to be touched. I, a boy of just 10 years, was more scared by the situation and still did not understand what was happening. Those caresses did not produce anything in me but cause a particular sensation to the two women who expressed it in their faces. The touch became an experience too abrupt and meaningless, although it became much worse when Angelica increased her desires and pulled down my pants, continuing her sick game. I could only see a kneeling woman navigating my private parts without being able to solve what was happening. When it seemed like it was about to be over, Angelica returned to the other women, calling for her to continue with their scheming. She pulled up her discolored skirt and she was wearing, and without looking at me, showed me her vagina, quite overwhelmed with pubic hair. It was a pretty colorless experience for me. It was very traumatic. The other woman followed in the footsteps of Angelica, and she approached me to continue touching me over my body when I still did not understand anything. Angelica stood to one side, watching, while the other showed me herself. Instead of impressing me, there were only the feelings of fear. A bitter feeling was just I was still very young. In my mind, there before me was two evil smiles of two people who were pleased with a child, a little one at that, with only felt the fear of getting home too late and would probably be punished by his mother. The experience as going to buy things in that place became another unfortunate situation, as I knew that mother would not believe me, and if I told her anything, instead it would cost me more punishment, which I should submit without doubt. The initial situations caused me the type of misfortune seen to be repeated over and over, without me being able to understand what these two women were doing to me. A fear grew every time. I had to fulfill my mother's errands. I sweated, cried, and even more nightmares. I was helpless. My older brothers, who would be able to enjoy being away from the household authority, never had to go to Vermelos or to endure this experience as I did. According to the World Health Organization, there is an average of 1 billion children worldwide in the last year, ranging from 2 to 17 years old, who are victims of abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. These type of violences of minors under 18 years old not only come from parents, but also from caregivers, their parents, and other people. The violence produced in childhood effects of growth, health, and well-being throughout a child's life. The World Health Organization works with global partners looking for a way to prevent these situations, reduce such high abuse cases in children. My Master's Sandals, Chapter 3. My mother was a teacher, and as such, she taught me to read and write using the Bible. As she was very religious, I learned through the interference and direction. I did not go to school until I was 12 years old because my mother was afraid I would learn things from others that were not in accordance with what she thought I should have been taught or was acceptable. This was a method of control on her part. This was the way my education evolved, and I loved the idea of surrounding myself with adults and listening to specific topics which I analyzed on my own to understand better with what was being discussed. Because of this, I learned to believe like an older person with the appearance of being older by my knowledge. I got the experience of school a little bit older than most kids, but I still sustained the desire to do things by myself. It was difficult adapting to life in the classroom and being close to other children who saw life differently in my world. I was basically like a calm and serious older man. My friends started to question. They wanted to know me a little. In return, they shared with me the experience of the unknown world that I did not know of because of how I had grown up. It was new to me when they talked about parents or siblings, favorite guys, loyal cousins, birthdays with the whole family, blowing out the candles on a cake full of cream with their name on it, colored balloons decorating the house, a table of snacks for attendees. I was not even familiar with Christmas or sharing a toy bought by Santa, his red and white outfit, and a reindeer that fly on Christmas Eve. Delivering promises, dreams, and wishes, I never knew about writing Santa a letter what I would like to receive. It was like the time when I realized I had missed many experiences of other children got to enjoy, known as normal, but never real to me. So many times these things I understood affected me because of how I had grown up. However, I had never lost the desire or want to achieve the next step on the ladder. I was always improving myself. I already had so many dark passages that I had solved, and I had achieved things at my very young age. Villa Faro, a city founded in 1950, was where I grew up. My parents were most likely to be some of the first residents. It was considered a ritual passage in the beginning where there was predominantly a hostile environment. Vacant lots were progressing in the 1970s, but there was a lot of housing construction that began. The Columbus Lighthouse built in 1992, bringing a beluga government and historical scene to the east part of Santo Domingo. It was made as a tribute to the conquest of the New World, as well as the Masonic College that was built in 1960. In the 80s, despite its population, it was particularly called Villa Lado, since the roads were not paved. Every time it rained, mud formed on all the roads. In 1994, the central government ordered asphalt to cover the streets, beginning a strange progress towards urbanization, recreational parks, and shops. One of the wide, dusty avenues, I rode my bicycle that was my older brother had acquired. He only took it when he went to work. I was feeling joyous, and I pushed away any remaining sadness by pedaling into the wind. Along my way, I created my own fun, doing tricks. I moved forward with my hands up, letting go of the handlebars, letting my imagination take me further, like I was competing in a great race where the finish line awaited me, the corner. One afternoon, on a spring day, I went for a walk a little further than usual. A new neighborhood had been established with the name Villa Maria. This was new people, new neighbors, which might also bring new friends. I observed the newly inaugurated route where I could switch up my normal rides, and walks. Without making any strange movement that may cause me to fall, I moved towards the villa. Crossing over the new territory without having explored much, I met the most beautiful woman in the world. Standing next to her, there was a very slender and pretty. I felt a strange trembling in my legs, thick hands, and a sudden difference in my heartbeat. Without being able to hide my admiration for how the young woman stared back at me, she seemed unaffected by me. However, I was about to fall for her. My eyes became lost in such beauty that the crush was instantaneous. I was shocked by that overwhelming look, and it left me perplexed. In those few seconds of seeing her, the feeling was impregnated inside me, and I knew I had to see her again. I quickened my pace, regained my strength, and began to pedal in an imaginary race. I went through the whole block and met her again and admire her, maybe say something to her, although I knew I wouldn't dare. Thousands of things went through my mind as I sped up the pace, and the bike happily responded to my request. I passed obstacles without stopping until finally this beautiful woman appeared standing in front of me. Again, her gaze penetrated me, touching my soul. She was very close to touching the stars, in my opinion. Time stopped in silence. I got closer to her and let her know that she made an impression on me. During those days, my desire to be known more about her became a priority. I especially wanted to know her name. I wasn't long until I was able to ask her and found her name as Eldamira. She was one of the most tormented nights and my thoughts and feelings that grew every day. The bicycle became my way to get to Villa Maria. Just seeing the bike caused me to feel satisfaction and tranquility because I associated with being able to see her. The truth was not in Maud, but in Eldamira. During those days, my desire to know more about her became a priority. I especially wanted to know her name. It wasn't long until I was able to ask her and found out her name was Eldamira. She was the one who tormented my nights through my thoughts, and my feelings for her grew every day. The bicycle became the best way to get to Villa Maria. Just seeing the bike caused me to feel the satisfaction and tranquility because I associated it with being able to see her. The truth was that I was enamored about Eldamira, and even her name was unforgettable to me. Every opportunity that came my way, I went by her house. I was walking with full energy towards home, with the excitement of knowing I would see her again. I went around the block, preparing my eyes to see her like I had before. But when I arrived, I stopped before she could see me. I observed a short distance a young man who looked the same age as my beloved. He was maneuvering a device with wooden base and 4 wheels. He went from the corner to corner, driving with one foot, making Eldamira delight in seeing him. The discouragement I felt when I saw that boy caused her to smile, and to get her attention was tremendous. I tried to lighten my step and get out of the drastic scene as soon as possible. I was so disheartened that someone else could impress her, but that I had not. I figured that I needed to have the same broad with my wheels the other man had. It didn't take me long to find what strange device was. It was a simple item, It was like a small car, a scooter without handles, what the English would have called a skateboard. At that time, I only knew of skates that fit on both feet. I never had them. I knew they were made by a person who wore them skate. Once they were worn on each foot, and underneath each foot, 4 wheels. I was able to obtain a single roller skate after searching many places. Logically, the single skate did not help me to learn how to use them when 2 roller skates were needed. One skate would not do when I needed to compete with the other one who had become my great rival. The boy was taking away the woman of my dreams, but since the background of my life involved finding solutions for everything on my own, I realized I could just create my own skateboard. I disassembled the single skate I found and divided the 4 wheels into 2 sections. I ended up finding a wooden board that I shaped in American style. The metal base helped me to be able to screw these parts together and adjust them so that I did not have balance, and the wheels stayed in a fixed position. Everything was created with great ingenuity, and in a couple of days, I was ready. I had my own skateboard reasonably quickly, and it fit me well, and it was made with my own 2 hands. I started practice using it inside my house, although it was not very big. I used to invent unique tricks and plan to win the smile of my beloved, who was being taken from me. At first, I tried to impress her with what I could learn. However, every time I passed her house, I found the young man with an American model doing some of the tricks right beside her. I figured his tricks were closer to Esmeralda's taste because she smiled with fond happiness seeing him do each maneuver. I decided I had to change my strategy and choose to use my brother's bicycle to confront her instead. In the following days, I was perfecting my speed passes with my hands up off the handlebars. I decided that would be as a best act, and I prepared long hours for the visit with her. She would hopefully give me a gaze. I was not sure it was going to do it. However, despite my efforts at the time of my presentation, my delivery despite my effort at the time of my presentation. The delivery must have been a disaster because Esmeralda did not bother to turn to me. From time to time, I moved my arms from side to side, others getting the attention. But I did not get any attention from her. My risky jiggling was useless. Nothing gave me the results I was after, and I was exhausted and frustrated. I returned home with a sadness filled my heart. Over time, after trying to win her over to the point of extreme exhaustion, Eldamira became aware of the feelings that she had awakened in me. She saw me every day seeking to get her attention, but for many times I frequented the avenue in front of her house. It was not difficult to assume I had feelings for her. My part in all of that, of course, was to know more about her. Eventually, I was able to discover that my beloved was 10 years older than me, but I didn't pay much attention to that because, from my perspective, it was a minor detail. In 1977, American film Saturday Night Fever, starring John Travolta, with the musical framework of the Bee Gees, became the most popular movie of my youth. I had box office records worldwide. I became a huge fan. The dream of dancing with Elda Maria made me just as obsessed as Elda Maria's sisters One of them, named Sandra, danced the Hudson rhythm that was specific to that film. It was the dance accompanied by Luigi, who at the time was Travolta of the neighborhood. Anger consumed me when I saw them enjoying the dance while I couldn't even do anything about it. I returned home clenching my teeth, wanting to learn the new dance and denying being young compared to the girls. My age seemed to prevent me from getting ahead in the situation. Only at night in my dreams did this really exist. The idea of seeing her in the short dress, stretching her arms out to me, and I in my white suit touching her waist, likely they did in the movie. We were moving to the same beat, dancing among the colored lights to the Bee Gees music. There in my dreams, we danced endlessly and created a tremendous emotion within me. I began to practice fulfilling my objectives by always hidden from my mother's gaze. If she saw me, everything would end. My dreams would be shattered. The dancing would be seen as going against our religion, as if it ran very deep in our home. We were Jehovah's Witnesses. My little sister served as my dance partner as time, and with her practice dancing, to tell you the truth, I never completed the dream I had. One of the many nights I tried to impress my beloved, I had taken the bicycle to go to Villa Maria. On the way, I saw a figure of a woman who was heading towards me. I kept moving forward with the mindset of my destination, and meters ahead, things were appearing more and more clearly. I continued in the low light of silence and distinguished a shadow a few meters away from me. I was taken by surprise. In just a few seconds, Eldamira stood before me. My heart began to change its beat wildly. My legs trembled the first time I saw her, with my hands sweating, so cold I could no longer feel them. However, this time I was brave, and I did not stop at the distance from her. I kept walking until I could observe her closely. Eldamira did not even let me introduce myself. In fact, she was very cordial at all, used her eyes to accuse me. She had launched her first words. "Child, I have found out that you are in love with me, that we have grown feelings for me. However, I want you to know this cannot be. You just need to forget about the situation altogether. I am much older than you." At the moment, I felt those words were squeezing my heart. Eldamira's words were already destroying me inside. She continued, "I would like you to get the idea out of your head. You are very young and you have a lot of growing up, yet much life to live. I do not want any problems. This is not even remotely possibility that this would work out between us. I will make it very clear." Eldamira gave me her last warning look. I had perfectly understood what she was saying to me, and she turned around and disappeared. A deep sadness stunned me, and for a few minutes on the sidewalk. After a long time of having a fateful encounter, I changed course and headed back home, feeling each tear that fell down my cheeks and the unease of an illusion of captive of my heart for some months that was now destroyed. The beautiful woman who at first was the owner of my dreams, my imagination, the one who filled my days with swirling butterfly feelings in my stomach, was gone. Eldamira became my first dream, the one that made me dream but also cry differently. This type of crying was different than I was used to, and it was not from the blow, mistreatment, or punishment. It made me lean that there was is also tears of love. Although you might suffer, you can also feel nice. It hurt me a lot to lose what meant so much to my heart, the love of my life, and I cried without consolation. I suffered like I've never had before. I did not want to speak or go out for a few days afterwards. This was my first experience for me and the attraction to another person. We stood out in the dark and was presence of that strange voice, the intentional voice that you call the spiritual voice. It had its interaction with me before my disappointment and deep sadness could turn into fear. I kept repeating it to me, everything will be fine. Having everything be fine did not make it logical sense to me, given how my life had gone. Nothing had ever gone fine. Without knowing how to explain it, this perspective of pain changed a little because the voice calmed down. It provided me a peace that was foreign to me. At first, I wanted to think that the voice was just an imagination. The voice had told me nothing was happening, that all this was an experience that would soon pass. I began to feel the sensation that could be familiar to dementia. Dementia occurred when my family on both sides of kinship with my parents. It scared me, and I was confused by the fact, for some reason, perhaps my misunderstanding could be linked to some psychiatric problem. To my satisfaction, it was not. At that moment, the voice thoroughly worked with my conscience. It still did not understand it, but reminded me for a long time, accompanying me at every moment. Perhaps it was the beginning of something good in my life. Perhaps new principles arrived in my life via the voice. There was never a fear of the voice, nor any brought by it. Time went on, and although some of my experiences were new and added to life, I continued seeing the world in the same way. My perspective remained the same. My character swayed between seriousness and leisurely. This led me to always behave like an older person. The guitar was part of my distraction from a depressing life, and I also began to practice martial arts. All this time, I kept the secrets from Mother, who did not tolerate things based on her religious beliefs. I could not have imagined coming to my home to tell her about the new techniques I've learned during the day. It was very likely that she would end up without me being able to practice martial arts or leaving me no place to sleep. Mother's method of torture was always at the foundation of my mind. My Master Sandals, Chapter 4. On one rainy afternoon, one of the many storms in the Dominican Republic caught me. I hurried to hide in a gigantic field full of herbs and medium trees. I had left without a plastic bag to put my martial arts uniform in because of being in such a rush leaving practice, and it had started to rain. I took martial arts very seriously. I felt like it was part of who I was, and I made an effort to develop it. The uniform was a sacred piece that was a part of this structure, so I took care of it with the utmost respect. The care was complicated because I had to hide it from my mother. Our bushes became my closet, where I made sure no one would find the uniform. Every time I finished using it, I wrapped it up in a black bag and hid it in the bushes. Martial arts complemented my love for the guitar. I took lessons at the Villa Faro Club, and I had to invent a valid excuse to my mother as to why I'd be gone during those times. I told her I was going out with determination to play basketball, because that served as a good reason not to be punished and made sure I could continue my practices. My mother was the main stumbling block on every objective I set. All I wanted to do was get ahead in life and learn, but it seemed like there was always something to hold me back. I got to know other teachers. With time, I became very popular with academics because I occupied the first place in everything I did. I applied myself and very reasonable. I followed instructions in each class religiously. In one of the tournaments I participated in, I got first place. When I could not be there publicity to receive the award, the organizers came to my house a few days later to present it. It was a lovely trophy that belonged to me as a winner of my category. When they arrived with enthusiasm and pride in me, they faced Mother's reaction. She was unaware of my activity outside the house. The director of one of the most important schools in the city knocked on my door, expressing to explain the reason for his visit. As was very common, my mother, they received a gesture of surprise and bitterness from her. "This is a mistake. My son does not practice this kind of insane and daring sport," was her reply. With great respect, he said, "Madam, your son has obtained first place in his category. He is very applied and an advanced boy, so we come with great joy to present him with this trophy." Mother received the award and without much explanation closed the door and waited for the words of her son, the champion. At this time, I was always prepared to invent an explanation for myself in any situation. Mother listened carefully to me, and I paused the test after a few moments. The fight had become part of my everyday life. After having achieved several titles in competition, my desire to continue advancing in my knowledge drove me to practice more seriously. I continued to pick up my uniform with the lie that I was going to play basketball. I took up more intense training sessions until one of those days another woman named Chabella crossed my path. The woman gave me purpose in my life. She was eager to discover my goals and interests. The taste of the female sex had long awakened in me, although I had not been very fortunate in my life. I entangled myself with things that helped me create a better future. I had long hair at the time. Chabella and I already met several times, and the attraction between us was born at the first moment. She worked in a beauty salon. We talked several times, exchanged ideas, many of which brought us closer. She was a very pretty woman with a charming smile. She was a few years older also. I meddled in martial art practices, which I did not neglect, and gave time to dedicate to her also. Guillermo, a very close friend in the neighborhood, presented himself as my most significant obstacle to advance in my conquest of concerning Chabella. I had met him by chance, and he expressed to me that he felt towards my new maiden. Of course, Guillermo did not know what Chabella spent time with me and gave me attention. I was a little embarrassed to go into detail with him when he found out Chabella and I were very close friends. Guillermo began to send messages in meticulously wrapped papers, asking me to please deliver them to her, hoping she would respond. I had to venture out and ask Chabella if it was a possibility of any taste for my friend. Guillermo, the answer was forceful and precise, no. Chabella indicated to me that Guillermo had not even crossed her mind. I felt internally tranquility about the situation and at the same time a sadness for Giuliano, who continued to insist on me giving pieces of paper with a note for her. Chabella refused to hear from him. Every time I tried to approach her on the subject, she ignored me, and I chose not to give her any of the notes. The problem was when a friend asked me if she had told me something to tell him in return. I only managed to tell him that I was delivering the messages to her, but that I had no message for him. I was frequently with her with great enthusiasm, but the coincidence betrayed me when I decided to tell her what I felt. I realized that I was like an erotic magazine. This served as a topic of conversation, which I did not dislike. One day she invited me and took care of me and cut my hair, which was quite long. She took my place as a client. I settled in her special chair and she began to do her work. Everything was happening in a normal way. We chatted and she adjusted my head to the rhythm of the cut. Suddenly, unexpectedly, in half-strange turn, Chabella reached down and gave me a surprise kiss on my lips. I did not even know how long it lasted. I can only say that it felt a little uncomfortable for Germero, although I enjoyed it in a very special way. I was filled with happiness. After so much time and friendship, I was being reciprocated. Fate was taking me on the right path, and Chabella quickly would be my vehicle that would make it easier for me to hear the voice through another human being. Through her, I was going to experience for the first time knowing that strange voice that accompanied me for all these years, the one from which I did not understand where it came from, the one that appeared in moments of solitude, danger, and happiness. At this time, I did not know how deeply the magnificent experience. I did not know how many, even through the experience itself, was fantastic. Chabella and I lasted the time that I stayed in Villa Faro until my parents' decision caused me to move from there. After a long period without seeing her, on one of my vacations in the Dominican Republic, and after knowledge and experience, I met her again. She was married and had 2 beautiful girls. That was the experience with the voice, through her a reality. I will touch on this topic later.